What is up, you guys? My name is Aubrey and this is my channel, and today we're going to be talking about a $579 billion deal that has seemed to have been met between Republicans and Democrats. We're going to be breaking down this spending bill. We're going to be talking about what it means, what we know right now, and of course, what it means for you. So let's get started. Infrastructure has been a big talking point when it comes to U.S. spending over the last few months because of the fact that back in March, President Joe Biden announced his American Jobs Plan, which is a huge infrastructure bill that lays out a plan to revamp and modernize the U.S. infrastructure. This bill includes things like improving roadways, railways, bridges, waterways, airports, providing resources to clean energy resources, making clean energy vehicles like electric vehicles a standardized practice in the US government, and so much more. The problem, though, is a few different things. Number one, it is a massive bill. It was valued at first to be over $2 trillion, but since then, this has been scaled back quite significantly. Not only the size of the bill is an issue, but also the way in which it is set to be paid for. If the bill was to be passed right now, today, in its current form, the way that this bill would be paid for is by raising some taxes, not only for wealthy people, but also for corporations as well. And lastly, a huge sticking point with the American Jobs Plan, besides its massive price tag, is the fact that it is being paired along with the American Families Plan. And it is also being paired with things and efforts that aren't considered to be traditional infrastructure. And so unsurprisingly, there has of course been a lot of pushback about the American Jobs Plan for all of these reasons and more that I've just outlined. Well, over the last few months, President Joe Biden has been negotiating back and forth with Republican lawmakers to try to come up with some sort of deal. But those discussions actually came to a pretty significant halt a couple of days ago whenever Republican senators came forward to President Joe Biden with a very small infrastructure bill valued at $257 billion. And after they weren't willing to increase that to a more substantial number, President Joe Biden simply cut off negotiations for the time being. That is until now, and it was recently announced that a group of bipartisan senators had come to a preliminary agreement of what the framework of a new infrastructure bill could look like. Now, this is really interesting because a couple of days ago, I actually made a video briefly talking about this infrastructure plan. I didn't go into any of the detail about it. I just kind of touched on it. And in that video, I mentioned that I did not think that there would be any sort of bipartisan deal reached on any sort of infrastructure bill because of the fact that I felt like there would be too much of a focus on the American Families Plan and making the American Families Plan work. So the fact that just about 24 hours after I published that video, it was reported that a bipartisan group of senators had reached a deal, or at least a preliminary deal, that was something that was not only encouraging, but also pretty surprising as well. Now, this bipartisan group of senators makes up 10 senators, 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats. And these senators include Bill Cassidy, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Rob Portman, Mitt Romney, Joe Manchin, Jeannie Shaheen, Kristen Sinema, Jon Tester, and Mark Warner. Now, as of right now, and as I'm recording this video, we don't exactly know what this infrastructure bill includes, but we do know that it is valued at $579 billion, and it is going to include a lot of the efforts of what would be dubbed traditional infrastructure. So I think that it is safe to assume that it probably will not have as high of an emphasis on clean energy as the previous deal, though I do think that there will be an emphasis on clean energy. I also think that it's safe to assume that there is no social infrastructure aspects to this bill either, though I am sure that portion of the bill will be negotiated later on this summer. Though the senators did state that this plan would outline this $579 billion being spent within a 5-year period of time. Though as of right now, we don't know a whole lot about this deal. We of course know the value of it, $579 billion, and we know in what time frame the bill is laid out for, which is 5 years. There's also one other important aspect that we do know, and that is the fact that as of right now, this bill is laid out with no tax hikes. So while the American Jobs Plan has tax increases for individuals making over $400,000 per year, a capital gains tax increase, as well as other tax increases, this plan would not include those tax increases. Though it is important to note that it is unclear if this plan would include increases for corporate income tax or if there is simply no tax increase used whatsoever, whether it be corporate or whether it be for individuals. But of course, that is something that will be released once more information on this bill is released as well. Now, the fact that lawmakers reached a deal is, of course, a big deal. It is always great to hear that lawmakers are working together to reach some sort of agreement, and it certainly is a step in the right direction. But just because it's a step in the right direction certainly does not mean that we are at the finish line, and we still have a ways to go before this becomes a reality. This bill does still have to be voted on, which is more often than not an uphill battle. Though Senator Chuck Schumer did announce and did make a statement this week stating that as of right now, lawmakers are exploring two paths to get an infrastructure and potentially a social infrastructure bill passed. Path number one is a traditional route of getting it passed like you would any other bill. Having a bill being brought to the floor, having it being negotiated, have it being agreed upon, and then passing by getting the required amount of votes. But he did state that there is a second path that is also being explored, and this is a path that we've seen before. In fact, we just saw it recently, and that is the path of budget reconciliation. Now, for those of you who don't know what budget reconciliation means, this is basically a way for lawmakers to get around the traditional vote threshold that is required for bills to become a law. But this can only be done for very specific types of legislations that have to do with government spending. Now, the thing about the process of budget reconciliation is this is oftentimes considered to be a fairly divisive and fairly controversial way of getting legislation passed because of a few different reasons. Number one is the fact that whenever this process is pursued, it means that the majority party typically makes the sole decision of passing this piece of legislation. So there oftentimes isn't a whole lot, if any, input from the minority holding party. In this case, it would be Democrats pushing this bill and Republicans not getting a whole lot of say in the matter. Number two is the fact that there is a lot of debate on what can be passed through this process. Like I mentioned earlier, the process of budget reconciliation is very strictly supposed to be used for budget-related legislation. And there's a lot of debate on what exactly is considered to be budget-related legislation. This term, an umbrella budget-related legislation, is more broad and open-ended than you would think. And because of that, it is left a bit to the interpretation of lawmakers. And because of that, there's of course a lot of debate and a lot of arguments about what can and what cannot be pursued through this process. But it is worth noting that though Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer did say that the process of budget reconciliation was on the table as a potential way to get this passed, it is not considered the first and most important method. He does want to get this passed through a traditional voting process, which would mean that this bill would need 60 votes to pass. Now, ultimately, an infrastructure bill will become a reality, and it probably will include things like energy, jobs, and traditional infrastructure. And based off of this deal that was just met between these senators, it's safe to assume that it will probably be between the price range of $500 billion and $600 billion. But the real interesting thing that should be playing out here soon within the next couple of months is the American Families Plan and how lawmakers will handle and deal with that piece of legislation, because that is considered to be a significantly more controversial bill because of the fact that it is social issues. So free community college, free child care, universal preschool, family resources, and more. That is certainly one that is going to be fought by lawmakers significantly more than this infrastructure bill. And I am very, very interested to see how this plays out. But like always, you guys, I hope that you found this video interesting and helpful, and I hope it gave you some insight into what could be the newest infrastructure spending bill that is passed by the US government. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.